Chapter: The Scion Attack. Miles and Lena waded cautiously through the rising water, struggling to keep their footing as chaos engulfed the once pristine cafeteria. The shattered windows allowed the ocean to surge in, flooding the room slowly. The mutated human-like creatures, called Scions, with their bald bluish skin, webbed hands and feet, and gills flaring with each breath, swam with terrifying precision. Their sharp teeth glinted as they lunged at the pair, relentless in their attacks. Miles fired his gun, the bullets tearing through the water but barely slowing the creatures. Lena, drenched and panicked, tried to hold them off with her own shots, but the water dragged every movement into slow motion. The creatures seemed unstoppable, their gills pulsating as they sliced through the water with ease. One of them slammed into Miles, sending him crashing into a submerged table, while another reached for Lena, its sharp claws narrowly missing her face. "Miles, they're too strong!" Lena yelled, her voice trembling with fear. The creatures circled, their webbed hands clawing and their gills flaring as they prepared for another assault. Then, without warning, one of the creatures lunged at Miles, its razor-sharp teeth bared and ready to tear him apart. A streak of glowing blue light pierced through the water, hitting the creature square in the chest. An explosion of fire and energy erupted, sending waves rippling through the flooded cafeteria. The injured creature let out a guttural scream before sinking into the water. The other creature, startled, hesitated for a moment before retreating into the murky depths. Lena turned to Miles, panting. "What was that?" Before either of them could process what had happened, a strong hand grabbed Lena's arm, another gripping Miles by his soaked jacket, and yanked them upward with surprising force. They were dragged through the water and up the staircase, coughing and gasping as they emerged into the open air. They collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and drenched, the salty taste of seawater still on their lips. Miles groaned, rolling onto his back, his chest heaving. What just happened?" Lena sat up, wiping water from her face, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Someone, or something, saved us." They both turned, and there she was. Helena stood a few feet away, her bow raised and glowing faintly with a soft blue light. Her emerald green eyes locked onto them, her expression a mix of caution and fear. Her smooth, flawless skin glistened faintly in the dim light, and her long, flowing hair dripping with water framed her striking face. The spiral markings above and below her eyes and her body gave her an almost mystical aura, as though she had stepped out of a legend. Her athletic figure was undeniable. Her simple outfit, a bra-like top and a skirt with torn edges, adorned with intricate Atlantean patterns, clinging to her as the wind caught her damp hair. The glowing belt at her waist pulsed gently, casting faint light across the dark ruins. Her stance was steady, unwavering, as if she were part of the ruins themselves. Her Metromite-powered bow hummed softly in her hands. Miles glanced at her, captivated by her beauty and strength despite the tension in the air. "Thank you," he said again, his voice sincere. "You saved us. We owe you." Helena didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly as she kept the bow raised, a blue arrow shimmering into existence as she pulled back the string. Her eyes darted between Miles and Lena, her breathing quick and shallow. She was clearly frightened, her body tense as though ready to strike at any moment. Lena stepped in front of him, her hands raised as well. "Wait, please, we're not your enemies." Helena's expression didn't soften. She spoke again in Atlantean, her voice steady but tinged with apprehension. The glowing arrow flickered as she held her aim, her eyes darting between them. "We don't understand you," Miles said softly. "But thank you. You saved us." Helena's grip on the bow tightened, but she hesitated, her breathing slowing as she studied them. Her fear and distrust were palpable, but so was her reluctance to harm them unnecessarily. After a tense moment, she took a small step back, her bow still raised, her piercing green eyes never leaving theirs. The air was thick with tension as the glowing arrow illuminated the space between them. Miles and Lena could feel her fear and strength in equal measure. This woman, whoever she was, had just saved their lives, but she clearly didn't trust them. Noticing her distrust, Miles reached into his sling bag slowly, moving carefully under Helena's watchful eyes. She tightened her grip on the bow, her body tensing as if she expected him to draw a weapon. Lena raised her hands in a calming gesture, her voice soft. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." Miles pulled out a small chocolate bar and held it up cautiously, showing it to Helena. "This," he said gently, trying to convey peace. He unwrapped part of the bar, broke off a piece, and popped it into his mouth to show it was safe. Then he handed the rest toward her, his palm open and unthreatening. Helena's sharp green eyes flicked between the chocolate bar and Miles. Slowly, suspiciously, she reached out and took it, her fingers brushing against his briefly. She examined the strange object as though it were some foreign artifact. Miles smiled and mimed eating, encouraging her. After a moment's hesitation, she sniffed the chocolate and carefully nibbled at it. Her eyes widened slightly, betraying her surprise at the sweet taste. Though she said nothing, her guarded posture relaxed ever so slightly. "That's better," Miles said softly, relieved to see her lowering her bow a fraction. He glanced over at Lena, who gave him a faint nod of approval. Meanwhile, Aina's soft voice buzzed in Miles's earpiece. "Deciphering Atlantean language. Basic words detected. Attempting translation." Helena tilted her head at the faint sound of Aina's voice, her brows knitting in confusion. Miles raised his hand in reassurance, pointing to his earpiece and saying, "AINA," before gesturing to the glowing glyphs on the library walls. Helena's attention shifted, her suspicion giving way to curiosity as she watched him intently. Aina's synthesized voice began to speak in broken Atlantean phrases. "Peace, help." Miles repeated the words clumsily, his pronunciation awkward but sincere. He gestured between himself and Lena as he said, "Peace." Helena's lips parted in surprise as she recognized the word. Though hesitant, she began to lower her bow further, her posture no longer aggressive, but still cautious. Miles took another step forward, his voice soft and steady. "My name is Miles," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to Lena. "Lena!" Helena stared at him for a moment, then lifted her hand and pointed to herself. "Helena," she said, her voice firm but melodic, the name rolling off her tongue like poetry. A small smile broke across Miles's face. "Helena," he repeated, careful to mimic her pronunciation. He extended his hand toward her. "Hello, Helena." Helena glanced at his hand, her expression unreadable. She hesitated, then slowly lowered her bow completely. Reaching out, she took his hand in hers for a brief, cautious handshake. Her grip was firm but fleeting, and her piercing green eyes locked onto his with a mix of suspicion and intrigue. Lena exhaled softly, the tension in the air finally easing. "Thank you," she said, though Helena wouldn't have understood the words. Helena stepped back slightly, her gaze still flickering between the glowing glyphs and the two strangers before her. Though her mistrust hadn't completely vanished, the small gestures and attempts at communication seemed to have planted the seed of doubt about her assumptions. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, who were these people and what were they really doing here? Miles gestured toward one of the larger, dimly lit chambers at the far end of the ruins. "Helena," he said softly, pointing in the direction of the library archive room, then mimed flipping through pages and scrolling through visuals, hoping she'd understand. Helena followed his gestures, her green eyes narrowing slightly in thought before she gave a small nod and began walking with them. As they entered the library's heart, the ancient space came to life around them. Rows of glowing glyphs illuminated the walls in response to their presence, casting soft blue and gold hues across the room. Theo was at the center, bent over a computer-like device projecting with visuals. Damon stood nearby, holding a crystal, his posture tense as he glanced toward the newcomers. Miles stepped forward, raising his hand calmly. "Damon, it's okay. She's with us." He turned to Helena, raising his hands in the universal gesture of peace. "It's okay. Peace. Friends." Helena's initial awe at the room quickly turned to alarm when she saw Damon. Her hand shot to her bow, drawing it swiftly. A glowing blue arrow materialized, crackling with energy as she aimed it directly at him. Theo froze, and Damon instinctively stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. Okay, peace, it's okay," Miles said urgently, stepping between them with his hands raised. "This is Theo, he said, gesturing for Theo to introduce himself. Theo, trying his best to appear non-threatening, gave a small wave. "Hello, Helena." Damon hesitated before speaking up as well, his voice cautious but steady. Hello, Helena? Helena's eyes flicked between the two men, her grip on the bow tightening for a moment before she slowly lowered it. The glowing arrow faded as she allowed herself a small breath. Her sharp eyes scanned the glowing glyphs and the library's reaction to the team. The walls pulsed with energy, and hidden glyphs began appearing on surfaces as if the ancient systems were awakening to their presence. Helena's expression softened slightly as she seemed to realize the library accepted them. Turning her attention to Theo, she spoke in Atlantean, her voice fluid and melodic, though incomprehensible to the group. Theo tilted his head, trying to decipher her intent. Realizing he couldn't understand her, he used sign language, pointing to the holographic screen and the glyphs displayed on it. He mimed flipping pages and then pointed at himself, trying to convey he was studying their language. Helena observed his gestures carefully, her expression shifting to one of understanding. Without a word, she walked toward one of the cabinets lining the room. Opening a drawer, she retrieved a crystal that shimmered faintly with metromite energy. She carried it over to Theo and handed it to him with a deliberate motion, her green eyes meeting his as if to say, "This might help you." Theo's eyes lit up. "Thank you," he said, inserting the crystal into the Atlantean device. The walls shimmered and displayed a new set of visuals, basic glyph lessons. The projections began to teach the glyphs in a systematic, almost childlike manner, as if teaching someone their first letters. Theo grinned widely. "This is it! This is what I've been looking for! The Rosetta Stone of Atlantis!" He turned to Miles and Lena, his excitement barely contained. "Aina, scan this! Start decoding. I'll keep pulling visuals for you." Miles touched his earpiece. "Kira, are you seeing this?" Kira's voice crackled through. "I'm watching, and oh my God, Miles, can we talk about her? Helena, those looks, that fashion. I want to look like her," she joked, her tone lighthearted. Miles chuckled. "I'll pass the compliment along. Hold on." Ina's voice suddenly spoke, playing through Miles's sling bag speaker. "Hello, Helena. This is Kira from the Sphere. Nice to meet you." The phrase repeated in Atlantean, the language perfectly translated by Aina. Helena's eyes widened in surprise as she heard her own language. She glanced at Miles, then at the speaker, before responding cautiously. "Hello, Kira. Welcome to Atlantis." Her melodic voice carried a calm yet measured tone, and for the first time there was a faint hint of a smile on her lips. Theo turned back to his screen, exhilarated. "Aina, we've got it! Language decoded! Start logging everything!" "Kira, send a work drone to the library immediately. I want every crystal in this room scanned and recorded." Kira's voice crackled back, tinged with enthusiasm. "On it! Well done, Theo! You're officially the first human to master Atlantean. Don't let it go to your head, though." The holograms continued to display more glyphs as AINA worked to catalog the data. The glowing walls seemed to hum in harmony, as if the library itself approved of their progress. Miles glanced at Helena, who was now standing calmly, observing them with curiosity rather than suspicion. He smiled at her, and to his surprise, she returned a small, hesitant smile of her own. It was a fragile moment of trust, but it was a start. Miles, noticing Helena's cautious yet curious gaze as the group worked, stepped closer to her, holding up his earpiece carefully so as not to alarm her. "Helena," he said, pointing to the small device and then to his ear. He mimed talking and gestured toward Lena and Theo, indicating a connection between them all. "Aina," he called, "can you translate real-time conversations between us and Helena?" Ina's voice responded promptly through his earpiece. "Understood. Activating live translation mode. Insert the earpiece into Helena's ear, and I'll handle the rest." Miles offered the earpiece to Helena, holding it out in his palm. "This will help us talk," he explained, even though he knew she wouldn't understand him yet. He pointed to the device, then his ear, and spoke a few words to demonstrate its purpose. Helena studied it skeptically, her green eyes narrowing slightly. She glanced at the others as if weighing whether or not to trust them before finally taking it from him. Carefully, she placed the earpiece in her ear. Miles watched her closely. "Aina, say something," he instructed. "Hello, Helena," Ina's voice said softly, speaking in flawless Atlantean. "This device will allow us to communicate. Please respond." Helena's brows lifted in surprise as she heard her language. She hesitated, then spoke, her melodic voice carrying a simple reply. "You can understand me now?" Miles smiled as Ina's translation played back into his ear in Helena's voice. "She's asking if we can understand her," Ina confirmed. Miles nodded enthusiastically and pointed at the group. "Yes, we can! This is Ina, and she's translating everything!" Helena's expression shifted, her guarded demeanor softening slightly as she tested the system. "Can you all hear me now?" The translation played instantly in Lena's and Theo's earpieces, leaving them stunned for a moment. Theo grinned. "Loud and clear, it's working!" Lena stepped forward with a friendly smile. "Yes, Helena, we can hear you." "This is incredible." Helena glanced between them, her expression still cautious but undeniably intrigued. "You have strange technology?" she said slowly, testing her words as if unsure whether they would come through correctly. When the group reacted with nods and smiles, she continued, "You are not Atlanteans! Where are you from?" Miles pointed toward the floating sphere in the distance. "We're from there. It's called the Sphere. It's a ship, I guess you could say. It brought us here." Aina translated his words seamlessly, and Helena tilted her head, her green eyes flicking to the sphere again. "Your ship is unlike anything I've seen. You're travelers, then?" "Yes," Miles replied, gesturing to Theo, Lena, and Damon. "We're here to learn about Atlantis, to understand what happened to your people." He paused, then added sincerely, "We don't mean any harm." Helena's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she spoke again, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "If that's true, why are you searching the library? What are you hoping to find?" Theo stepped in, adjusting his earpiece. "I'm Theo," he said, pointing to himself, then the glowing glyphs on the screen. "I'm trying to understand your language, your history. We've already learned so much, but there's still so much we don't know. You've helped us a lot already." Helena considered his words, her expression unreadable. "You seek knowledge," she said slowly, her gaze drifting to the glowing walls of the library. "Atlantis holds many secrets. Some are not meant to be uncovered." Miles stepped forward, his tone calm and respectful. "We're not here to disturb or destroy anything, Helena. We're here to help. Your people created something extraordinary, and we want to learn from it, maybe even protect it." Helena studied him, her green eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him pause. "Protect it? From what?" Miles hesitated, glancing at Lena and Theo before answering. "From being lost forever. If we don't learn from the past, the future could suffer." Aina's translation echoed his words, and for the first time, a faint smile touched Helena's lips. "You speak like an Atlantean," she said, her tone softening further. "Perhaps you are not so different after all." The group exchanged relieved smiles, the tension in the air finally beginning to dissipate. Helena looked around the room, her hand brushing against the glowing glyphs as if connecting with the ancient knowledge. For the first time, she didn't seem like a wary stranger, but someone willing to listen and perhaps trust.